The smallest gifts are sometimes the ones that expose the biggest emptiness. Beneath the shimmering crystal chandeliers of the Sterling Children's Foundation Charity Gala, every guest expected another flawless evening celebrating wealth, influence, and generosity. Luxury cars lined the entrance for nearly half a mile, television cameras followed celebrities across the red carpet, and priceless paintings decorated the grand ballroom where business leaders, politicians, and philanthropists exchanged polished smiles beneath soft golden lights. At the center of it all stood Victoria Sterling, the 37-year-old billionaire chief executive officer, whose name had become synonymous with success, innovation, and impossible ambition. She accepted elegant watches, rare jewelry, handwritten letters from world leaders, and generous donation pledges worth millions of dollars with the same gracious smile she had perfected over the years. The applause never seemed to end, yet something behind her calm blue eyes remained distant, almost unreachable, as though every expensive gift only reminded her of something money could never replace. Near the back of the ballroom, unnoticed by almost everyone, Ethan Brooks quietly adjusted the sleeves of his clean navy blazer while standing beside his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. He had spent the entire afternoon wondering if they truly belonged among people whose watches cost more than his pickup truck, but Lily had insisted they come after their local community center received 2 complimentary invitations. She held a tiny paper gift box wrapped with blue ribbon so carefully that even the smallest crease had been smoothed flat by patient little fingers. Ethan looked down at her and smiled gently. "You don't have to give it away if you've changed your mind," he whispered. Lily shook her head without hesitation. "Dad, sometimes grown-ups look happy without really feeling happy." Ethan blinked, surprised by the quiet wisdom only a child could speak so naturally. Before he could answer, the master of ceremonies invited guests to greet Victoria personally before the evening concluded. One by one, elegantly dressed donors stepped forward carrying velvet boxes and luxury gift bags while photographers captured every polished moment. Then Lily tugged softly on her father's hand. Together, they walked through the crowd, attracting curious glances from guests who recognized neither expensive designer labels nor influential family names. Their simple clothes seemed almost invisible beneath the sparkle surrounding them. When Lily finally stood before Victoria, the ballroom became unexpectedly quiet. The little girl lifted the tiny paper box with both hands and smiled with complete sincerity. "This is for you," she said. Victoria accepted the lightweight package politely, expecting another child's drawing prepared for the charity auction. Instead, when she slowly opened the lid, she found a small handmade bracelet woven from blue and white embroidery thread resting beside a folded piece of construction paper. She unfolded the drawing with careful fingers. It showed a smiling woman standing beneath a bright sun while holding hands with a little girl beside the words, "Everyone needs someone who remembers them." For one long heartbeat, Victoria simply stared. The applause faded into silence. The cameras lowered almost instinctively. Her composed expression trembled for the first time anyone could remember. Her fingers tightened around the bracelet as memories she had buried beneath decades of achievement rushed back without warning. A single quiet tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it, and an entire ballroom filled with the richest people in the city suddenly discovered that the smallest gift on the table carried the greatest weight of them all. 2 days earlier, before a quiet handmade bracelet unexpectedly changed the atmosphere inside one of the city's most elegant ballrooms, another morning had begun like hundreds before it on the east side of Columbus. Long before sunrise painted the sky with soft shades of blue, Ethan Brooks was already awake, moving carefully through the small house so he would not disturb his daughter. The old coffee maker hummed on the kitchen counter while slices of bread browned inside the toaster. He packed Lily's lunch with a turkey sandwich, apple, slices, carrot sticks, and a handwritten note that simply read, "Keep being kind. Love, Dad." It was a habit he had never missed, not even on the hardest days. After losing his wife years earlier, he had promised himself that no amount of exhaustion would ever become his daughter's burden. When Lily finally came downstairs wearing her favorite yellow sweater and carrying a backpack almost as big as she smiled before saying a single word. "Good morning, Dad." Ethan smiled back. "Good morning, kiddo. Ready for another adventure?" She nodded enthusiastically while climbing onto her chair, and the little kitchen filled with quiet conversation about spelling tests, recess, and whether the neighborhood squirrels remembered where they buried their acorns. There was nothing extraordinary about the morning, yet everything about it felt meaningful, because they still had each other. After dropping Lily off at school, Ethan drove his aging blue pickup truck to Brooks Auto Repair, a modest neighborhood garage where honesty mattered more than profit. He greeted every customer by name whenever he could remember it, explained repairs in plain language, and never recommended work that was unnecessary. By late morning, an elderly veteran arrived worried that his old sedan would not make it through another week. Ethan inspected the vehicle, discovered that the repair was far simpler than expected, and charged only for the replacement part. When a grateful man tried to press extra cash into his hand, Ethan politely declined. "Save it for something you enjoy," he said with an easy smile. "Your granddaughter mentioned she likes baseball. Maybe take her to a game." The customer drove away smiling, and Ethan quietly returned to work without thinking anyone had noticed. That afternoon, Lily sat at a small table in the corner of the garage, surrounded by colored paper, embroidery thread, safety scissors, and markers she had collected from old school projects. Her tiny hands carefully braided blue and white strands together while she concentrated harder than she ever did on homework. Ethan wiped grease from his hands and walked over. "That looks important," he said. Lily nodded. Without looking up, "It is. Who is it for?" She paused for a moment before answering. "For someone who looks lonely." Ethan chuckled softly. "Do you know someone like that?" Lily thought carefully before replying. "Sometimes people smile because everyone expects them to. That does not always mean they feel happy." Ethan leaned against the workbench, quietly amazed that an 8-year-old could notice things many adults ignored. "That is a pretty big observation," he admitted. Lily finally looked up and smiled. "Maybe they just need somebody to remember them." Ethan felt something warm settle in his heart. He kissed the top of her head and returned to work, never imagining that the simple bracelet slowly taking shape beneath his daughter's careful fingers would soon reach someone whose life appeared perfect from the outside, yet whose heart had quietly been waiting years for exactly that kind of kindness. The gala ended hours earlier, yet Victoria Sterling did not ask her driver to take the usual route home. She sat quietly in the back of the black sedan with the tiny paper box resting on her lap, while the lights of downtown Columbus slipped past the window like distant memories. Her assistant reviewed tomorrow's schedule from the front seat, listing board meetings, investor calls, and interviews, but Victoria barely heard a word. Her fingers remained wrapped around the small handmade bracelet, gently tracing every uneven knot that a child had patiently tied by hand. When the car finally arrived beneath the towering glass entrance of her penthouse building, she thanked her assistant, carried the little box upstairs herself, and declined the offer of a late dinner. The apartment overlooking the city was breathtaking, filled with modern art, polished marble, and walls of glass that revealed miles of sparkling lights below, yet the silence inside felt heavier than ever. She removed her heels, placed the expensive jewelry she had worn that evening inside a velvet case, then carried only the tiny paper box into the living room. Sitting beside the large window, she unfolded Lily's drawing once again, the smiling woman holding a little girl's hand beneath a bright yellow sun looked wonderfully imperfect. The lines were uneven. The colors drifted outside the edges. The handwriting was unmistakably that of a young child. Yet something about the picture reached a place inside her that years of success had never touched. She slipped the bracelet around her wrist, studying how the simple blue and white threads contrasted against the elegant watch she usually wore. Suddenly, another image appeared in her mind with remarkable clarity. She was 8 years old again, sitting at a worn kitchen table while her mother patiently braided blue embroidery thread into a friendship bracelet during a rainy Saturday afternoon. Her mother had smiled and said, "Beautiful things do not have to be expensive. They only have to remind someone they are loved. Victoria had not thought about those words in decades. After her mother's passing, she had buried herself in school, then business, believing achievement could somehow silence grief. Instead, every promotion, every award, every headline only made the quiet apartment feel larger when she returned home alone. She walked slowly toward an old wooden cabinet rarely opened anymore and removed a small storage box containing photographs, birthday cards, and handwritten recipes preserved from another lifetime. Beneath a faded family photograph rested a bracelet almost identical to the one now wrapped around her wrist, its blue threads worn soft by time. She held both bracelets side by side, and for the first time in many years, the careful walls around her heart began to give way. A single tear landed softly on the child's drawing before another followed, not from sadness alone, but from remembering what genuine kindness felt like before life became measured by quarterly reports and public expectations. She whispered into the quiet room, "Thank you," though no one was there to hear it. The following morning, instead of removing the handmade bracelet before work, she left it exactly where it was. During an executive meeting, one director noticed it and smiled politely. "That is different from your usual style." Victoria looked at the bracelet for a long moment before answering with unexpected warmth. Sometimes the smallest things deserve the most permanent place. As the meeting continued, her thoughts returned again and again to the little girl with the bright smile and to the quiet father who had stood beside her without asking for recognition. And for reasons she could not yet explain, Victoria realized she wanted to know whether kindness like theirs was simply a single beautiful moment or the way they truly lived every ordinary day. 3 days later, Victoria arrived on the east side of Columbus in a dark blue sport utility vehicle with no company logo, no security team, and no announcement. She had chosen a simple navy sweater, blue jeans, and comfortable sneakers instead of her usual tailored business suits, because she wanted to observe without changing the rhythm of the place she was about to visit. The handmade bracelet still rested quietly on her wrist beneath the sleeve of her sweater, hidden from most people but never forgotten by her. As she parked across the street from Brooks Auto Repair, she remained inside the vehicle for several moments, watching the small neighborhood garage come alive. Customers arrived one after another. Some drove aging pickup trucks. Others brought family sedans that had clearly seen many years of faithful service. Ethan Brooks greeted every person with the same calm smile regardless of the condition of the vehicle they drove. There was no rush in his voice, no impatience, and no attempt to impress anyone. He simply listened. A young mother arrived, looking worried, because she needed her minivan to take her children to school the following morning. Ethan examined the problem carefully, then smiled reassuringly. "It is not as serious as you feared. Give me about an hour, and I think we can have you safely back on the road today." Relief immediately appeared across her face. Not long afterward, an older gentleman walked into the garage carrying a small bag of groceries. Before the man could even ask for assistance, Ethan stepped forward, carried the groceries to a nearby bench, and opened the passenger door of the customer's car so he could sit comfortably while waiting. Nobody applauded. Nobody recorded the moment. It was simply the kind of kindness that happened naturally when no one expected recognition. Victoria remained quietly outside, realizing that Lily had learned compassion from someone who practiced it every single day. Around noon, Lily arrived after school carrying her backpack and waving excitedly toward her father. Ethan smiled the moment he saw her, wiped his hands on a clean shop towel, and bent down to listen as she eagerly described a science project involving butterflies. He gave her his complete attention, as though nothing else in the busy garage mattered for those few precious minutes. Victoria found herself smiling without realizing it. She had attended meetings worth billions of dollars where people rarely looked away from their phones. Yet here a father paused everything simply because his daughter wanted to tell him about her day. A little later, one customer quietly admitted he could not afford all the recommended maintenance until his next paycheck. Ethan studied the estimate, crossed out 2 labor charges with his pen, and handed the paper back. "Take care of your family first," he said. "We will work out the rest later." The customer tried to argue, but Ethan only smiled and returned to the repair without making the moment feel important. Watching from a distance, Victoria understood something that had escaped her for years. Generosity was not measured by the size of a donation. Sometimes it appeared in a mechanic choosing fairness over profit, in a father giving his daughter undivided attention, or in ordinary conversations filled with respect instead of urgency. Before leaving, she glanced once more toward the open garage. Ethan was laughing quietly with Lily as they shared sandwiches at a small wooden table beside the shop. The scene looked almost impossibly ordinary, yet it carried a peace that could not be purchased, negotiated, or earned through success alone. As Victoria started the engine and slowly drove away, she knew she would return, not because she was searching for another touching story, but because she had begun searching for the part of herself that seemed to come alive whenever she was near people who measured life by kindness instead of achievement. Victoria returned the following Friday, just before noon, this time carrying nothing except a reusable water bottle and a quiet curiosity she could no longer explain. She parked in the same place across the street, but before she could step out of the vehicle, Lily spotted her through the garage window and waved with such genuine excitement that pretending to be an anonymous visitor suddenly felt impossible. Ethan looked up from beneath the hood of a silver sedan, smiled politely, and walked over after wiping his hands with a clean shop towel. "Good to see you again," he said with the same relaxed warmth he offered every customer. "I hope everything is all right with your vehicle." Victoria smiled and shook her head. "Everything is fine. I was actually in the neighborhood and thought I would stop by." Ethan nodded as though that explanation required no further questions. "Well, you picked the right time. We are about to have lunch if you would like to join us." The invitation was so natural that Victoria almost forgot she had spent years attending exclusive executive lunches, where every conversation seemed carefully calculated. Here there were no reserved seats, no carefully prepared speeches, and no expectations beyond sharing a meal. They gathered around the small wooden picnic table beside the garage while Lily unpacked homemade turkey sandwiches, apple slices, oatmeal cookies, and fresh lemonade from an insulated bag. "Dad makes the best sandwiches," Lily announced proudly. Ethan laughed softly. "She says that because she helped make them this morning." Victoria accepted a sandwich with sincere gratitude. "Then I guess both of you deserve the credit." They talked about ordinary things that somehow felt extraordinary. Lily described her science class and the butterfly project that now included painted flowers covering nearly an entire bulletin board. Ethan shared stories about customers who had owned the same pickup truck for more than 20 years because they believed taking care of things mattered more than replacing them. Victoria found herself laughing more during that simple lunch than she had during months of corporate dinners. Nobody asked about stock prices. Nobody discussed market competition. Nobody seemed interested in titles or influence. Lily eventually noticed the familiar blue and white bracelet resting beneath Victoria's sweater sleeve. Her eyes widened with delight. "You are still wearing it." Victoria gently touched the bracelet and smiled. "I have not taken it off." Lily beamed with uncomplicated happiness. "That makes me really happy." Ethan looked at the bracelet, then back at Victoria with quiet appreciation. She put a lot of love into making that. Victoria met his eyes for a brief moment. "I know," she answered softly. "I think I felt it the moment I opened the box." A comfortable silence settled over the table as a light autumn breeze carried colorful maple leaves across the parking lot. For the first time in years, Victoria realized she was not thinking about the next meeting waiting on her calendar or the hundreds of unread emails filling her inbox. She was simply present. After lunch, she offered to help clean the table, gathering paper napkins and empty cups while Lily insisted on carrying the cookie container back inside. Ethan smiled as he watched the two of them laughing over something too small for anyone else to hear. It struck him that despite her polished appearance and obvious success, there was an unmistakable gentleness about Victoria that seemed to grow stronger every time she visited. Before leaving, she thanked them once again for the meal. Ethan replied with quiet sincerity, "You are welcome here anytime." As Victoria drove away beneath rows of brilliant autumn trees, She glanced at the bracelet once more and realized something had changed without her noticing. She had first returned hoping to understand why a child's gift had moved her so deeply. But somewhere between a homemade sandwich, a little girl's laughter, and the quiet dignity of a father who treated everyone with equal respect, she had stopped searching for an explanation. She had simply begun looking forward to coming back. Autumn settled more deeply over Columbus, and with each passing week Victoria found herself visiting Brooks Auto Repair whenever her schedule allowed, never announcing her arrival and never expecting special treatment. She became another familiar face in the neighborhood, and although a few regular customers quietly remarked that she looked strangely familiar, most simply knew her as the friendly woman who enjoyed homemade lemonade and always remembered everyone's name. Ethan never pried into her personal life. He believed people revealed what they wished to reveal when they were ready, and that quiet respect made every conversation feel effortless. One Tuesday afternoon, however, the peaceful rhythm of the garage shifted. The owner of the property arrived carrying a thick folder beneath his arm and asked Ethan if they could speak privately. A few minutes later, Ethan returned to the work area with the same calm expression he always wore, but Lily noticed the slight pause before he picked up his wrench. She walked over and slipped her small hand into his. "Is everything okay, Dad?" Ethan smiled reassuringly. "Everything will be okay." Victoria happened to arrive just in time to see the exchange. She waited until the last customer had left before asking gently, "Did something happen?" Ethan looked toward the nearly empty parking lot before answering honestly. "The property has been sold. The new owners plan to redevelop the entire block. I have about 60 days before the garage has to close." Victoria remained silent for a moment. "I am so sorry." Ethan simply nodded. "Life changes. It always does. My job is to make sure Lily knows that change does not have to steal your hope." There was no bitterness in his voice, no complaint about unfairness, and no request for help. Instead, he returned to tightening the last bolt on a customer's truck exactly as though nothing had happened. Later that afternoon, he called every customer whose repairs would extend beyond the closing date and helped them find trusted local mechanics who could continue the work. He even recommended neighboring shops that technically competed for the same business because he cared more about his customers than his own pride. Victoria watched quietly from a distance, feeling both admiration and disbelief. She had spent years watching executives protect their positions at any cost. Yet here was a man willingly placing other people's needs ahead of his own future. As sunset painted the sky in warm shades of orange and gold, Lily sat beside her father on the small wooden bench outside the garage. "Will we lose everything?" she asked softly. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "No, sweetheart. A building can close. A business can move. But honesty, kindness, and hard work go wherever we go. Those are the things nobody can take away." Victoria turned away for a moment, so neither of them would notice the emotion in her eyes. She understood then that simply offering Ethan money would solve the immediate problem, but would also ignore the very quality she respected most about him. He deserved an opportunity, not charity. As she drove back toward downtown that evening, the handmade bracelet rested lightly against the steering wheel with every turn. By the time the city skyline appeared ahead of her, an idea had already begun taking shape. Sterling Global had recently discussed expanding its regional vehicle maintenance division. Independent service leaders would soon need to be evaluated across Central Ohio. The selection process could be completely fair, professionally managed, and based entirely on merit. Ethan would receive no special treatment, no hidden advantage, and no promises. He would simply be given the opportunity to stand where his character and ability could finally be seen by people capable of recognizing both. The following Monday morning, Victoria entered the executive boardroom of Sterling Global with the same confidence her leadership team expected, but this meeting would unfold differently from any they had attended before. A presentation appeared on the large screen outlining the company's planned expansion of its regional fleet maintenance operations throughout Central Ohio. Senior executives discussed logistics, budgets, and projected growth while Victoria listened quietly before speaking. If we want leaders who understand service, we should look beyond resumes alone, she said. There are independent shop owners throughout this region who have spent years earning. Trust one customer at a time. I want our hiring process to identify character as carefully as technical skill. No one questioned the proposal because it aligned perfectly with the company's long-term strategy. Within days, a professional evaluation team was assembled to visit outstanding independent repair facilities across several counties. Every candidate would be assessed using identical standards that included customer satisfaction, leadership, technical knowledge, workplace organization, integrity, communication, and community reputation. Victoria deliberately removed herself from the selection committee, making certain the process remained objective and beyond criticism. She knew that if Ethan succeeded, it had to be entirely because he deserved it. Several days later, 2 members of the evaluation team arrived at Brooks Auto Repair without revealing the true purpose of their visit. They introduced themselves as representatives gathering information about independent service businesses in the region. Ethan welcomed them with the same relaxed courtesy he offered everyone else. He answered questions honestly, demonstrated repair procedures without exaggeration, and continued helping customers naturally instead of trying to impress his visitors. Throughout the afternoon, the evaluators quietly observed how he explained complicated mechanical problems in simple language, how he treated every customer with equal respect regardless of their financial situation, and how he thanked each employee for their work before locking up for the evening. They also noticed something impossible to record on a spreadsheet. Every customer who left the garage smiled. Before departing, one evaluator asked, "What do you think makes a successful business?" Ethan paused briefly before replying. "People trust you long before they remember your prices. If they know you're honest, they come back. If they know you care about their family, they tell someone else. Everything else grows from that." The evaluators exchanged a quick glance, but offered no reaction. Back at Sterling Global, reports from every inspection were reviewed independently by multiple department leaders. Candidate names were temporarily replaced with identification numbers to reduce bias. Scores were compared, interviews summarized, and customer references verified. When the final rankings appeared, Ethan's file consistently rose to the top. One executive looked up from the report with genuine surprise. "Whoever candidate 7 is, this person earned remarkable feedback. Technical performance is excellent, but the leadership comments are even stronger." Another executive nodded. "Customers describe him as someone they trust with both their vehicles and their peace of mind." Victoria remained completely silent, her expression calm as she listened to the committee reach its own conclusions. No one in the room realized she already knew the man behind Candidate 7. She had intentionally left that story outside the boardroom because she wanted this moment to belong entirely to his own merit. At the conclusion of the meeting, the committee unanimously recommended inviting the highest-ranked finalist to Sterling Global Headquarters for formal interviews before making the final appointment. Ethan Brooks received an official invitation by certified mail 2 days later. Reading the letter at his kitchen table after dinner, he looked at Lily with quiet disbelief. "I did not even remember applying for something like this," he admitted. Lily grinned as though the answer were obvious. "Maybe somebody finally noticed the way you always help people." Ethan smiled, folded the letter carefully, and looked out the kitchen window toward the fading evening light. He still had no idea that the smallest act of kindness his daughter had ever offered was continuing to open doors neither of them had imagined possible. The interview invitation arrived on a clear Monday morning, and Ethan spent the following week preparing the only way he knew how. He polished his shoes, pressed his navy blazer, reviewed his years of maintenance records, and practiced answering questions after Lily had gone to bed. Every evening, she sat across the kitchen table, pretending to be an interviewer. "Why should we hire you?" she asked with an exaggerated, serious expression. Ethan laughed before answering honestly. "Every single time. Because I believe people deserve to be treated with respect, whether they're driving a brand new truck or a 20-year-old sedan." Lily nodded proudly. "That is a good answer." When interview day finally arrived, Ethan parked his aging blue pickup truck in the visitor lot outside Sterling Global Headquarters. Glass towers reflected the morning sunlight, while employees in business attire hurried through the revolving doors, carrying laptops and coffee cups. Ethan took a slow breath before stepping inside. He reminded himself that whatever happened, he would leave knowing he had been true to himself. The reception staff welcomed him warmly and guided him to a conference room where several finalists quietly waited. Some had managed large commercial repair facilities. Others had impressive technical certifications and years of corporate leadership experience. Ethan greeted each candidate with a friendly handshake, wishing them good luck without seeing them as rivals. One candidate smiled afterward and quietly remarked, "You are the only person in this room who seems completely relaxed." Ethan answered with a small smile, "There is no reason not to be. We all worked hard to get here." Throughout the morning, each finalist met separately with the executive hiring committee. Ethan spoke honestly about preventive maintenance, leadership, customer trust, employee development, and community responsibility. He admitted mistakes he had learned from rather than pretending to be perfect. When one executive asked how he handled difficult customers, Ethan replied, "Most people are not actually difficult. They are usually worried. If you listen first, many problems become conversations instead of conflicts." Another executive asked what success meant to him. Ethan paused before answering. "Success is when people know they can depend on your word, even when nobody is watching." The committee members quietly exchanged thoughtful glances while taking notes. Hours later, after every interview had concluded, the executives gathered privately to compare their evaluations. Individual scores were reviewed one final time, comments were discussed, and every category was carefully considered. Without any instruction from Victoria, the committee independently reached the same conclusion. Ethan Brooks had demonstrated not only exceptional technical knowledge, but also the calm leadership, humility, and integrity the company wanted representing its growing regional operations. Only after the committee formally approved its recommendation did Victoria enter the room. She reviewed the completed evaluation, smiled gently, and signed the final appointment documents. Later that afternoon, Ethan was invited into the executive conference room once more. As the doors opened, he stopped for just a moment. Standing near the large windows overlooking the Columbus skyline was Victoria, dressed once again in an elegant ivory business suit. For the first time since their lunches beside the garage, she stood before him not as a quiet visitor, but as the chief executive officer of Sterling Global. Ethan's eyes widened with surprise before he smiled in genuine recognition. Victoria stepped forward and extended her hand. "Congratulations, Mr. Brooks. The committee has unanimously selected you to become our new regional maintenance operations manager." Ethan accepted the handshake, still processing what he had just heard. Before he could find the right words, Lily, who had been invited to join the celebration after school, ran into the room carrying her backpack. She looked immediately at Victoria's wrist and gasped with delight. The blue and white bracelet was still there. "You never stopped wearing it," she said softly. Victoria looked down at the bracelet and smiled with quiet gratitude. "No," she answered, "because some gifts remind us who we were, and some gifts remind us who we still have the chance to become." Several months later, the final warm days of autumn settled gently across Columbus, painting the city in shades of gold, amber, and crimson. Ethan Brooks had fully embraced his new role as Regional Maintenance Operations Manager at Sterling Global, but remarkably little about him had changed. He still arrived early every morning, greeted every technician by name, listened before speaking, and believed that leadership began with respect rather than authority. His office door remained open throughout the day because he wanted every employee, from experienced managers to newly hired apprentices, to know they would always be heard. Whenever someone praised his promotion, he answered with the same quiet smile. "A title can change your responsibilities," he often said, "but it should never change your character." The old garage building had been carefully emptied before redevelopment began, yet Ethan had kept one small wooden workbench in storage. On weekends, he and Lily still used it together in their backyard to build birdhouses, repair bicycles for neighborhood children, or simply spend time talking while the afternoon drifted peacefully by. Some traditions, they agreed, deserved to remain exactly as they were. Victoria also found herself changing in ways that surprised even those closest to her. Her calendar still overflowed with meetings, interviews, and board presentations, but she no longer hurried through every moment searching for the next accomplishment. She scheduled regular visits to community programs supported by the foundation, not for publicity, but because she genuinely wanted to know the people whose lives were being touched. Employees noticed she spent more time listening than speaking. Executives discovered she asked about families before discussing quarterly reports. The quiet bracelet woven from blue and white thread remained on her wrist every single day, standing beside elegant watches and tailored business suits without ever looking out of place. Many people asked where she had found such an unusual accessory. She always smiled before answering. It was made by someone who reminded me what success is really supposed to feel like. One peaceful Sunday afternoon, Victoria met Ethan and Lily at the lakeside park where colorful maple leaves covered the walking paths like a soft quilt. Children laughed in the distance while geese drifted slowly across the calm water. Lily ran ahead, collecting the brightest leaves she could find, carefully comparing their shapes as though each one were a tiny treasure. Ethan and Victoria followed at an easy pace, enjoying the comfortable silence that no longer required explanation. After a while, Lily returned carrying a handful of brilliant red and golden leaves. She looked at Victoria's wrist and smiled exactly as she had on the night of the gala. "You still have it." Victoria gently touched the bracelet before looking toward Ethan. "I always will." Lily tilted her head with innocent curiosity. "Why?" Victoria knelt beside her and answered with complete honesty. "Because every time I see it, I remember that kindness is never small. Sometimes the quietest gift can change the loudest life." Ethan looked across the peaceful lake, then back toward the two people standing beside him. Months earlier, they had been strangers separated by wealth, expectations, and completely different worlds. Now they were connected by trust, gratitude, and a simple act of generosity that had asked for nothing in return. The sun slowly disappeared beyond the trees, covering the water with a warm golden reflection as the three of them continued walking together beneath the falling autumn leaves. No reporters were there. No applause echoed around them. No headlines announced what had happened. The greatest changes had unfolded far from the world's attention, exactly where true dignity often grows. And somewhere beneath the quiet evening sky, a father, a daughter, and a woman who had rediscovered hope through a child's handmade gift silently proved that the most valuable things we leave in another person's life can never be measured by wealth, only by the kindness we choose to give when nobody expects it.